How does someone actually get charged with contempt of authority? You know, it's almost never one big, dramatic moment. It's more like a chain reaction, a series of choices that just keep escalating. In this explainer, we're not just going to go through some boring legal checklist. Instead, we're going to follow a story, a step-by-step journey of how simple non-compliance can spiral into really serious, life-altering trouble.
So, what really happens when you decide to ignore the law? Well, try to think of it less like a single mistake and more like a ladder. Each rung our hypothetical person climbs is a more deliberate offense, with a heavier consequence just waiting for them. We're going to follow them right up this ladder, from the very first act of avoidance all the way to the end. Okay, let's get into it.
All right, so our story begins with the most basic form of contempt, just plain avoidance. A legal summons shows up, and our character's first instinct is to try and make it go away by, well, making themselves go away. This is Act 1, trying to disappear.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how you can literally see the escalation. It all kicks off with step 1. You just hide or run away so you can't be served with a notice. That's section 206. But when that doesn't work, you move to step 2. You start physically preventing it from being served, maybe tearing the notice off your door. That's section 207. And the final step, section 208, is when it's all done, the notice is in your hand, and you make the conscious choice to just not show up. Each move is a deliberate step up that ladder.
And believe me, the stakes jump dramatically depending on who you're ignoring. The law draws a very clear line in the sand here. If the summons is for some general public duty, the penalty is one thing. But if that piece of paper requires your presence in a court of justice, the penalty skyrockets to 6 months. The takeaway is simple. Ignoring the court itself is a whole different ballgame.
And this is the climax of Act 1. If our character keeps ignoring court proclamations to appear, they can be declared a proclaimed offender. This is the end of the road for just trying to hide. We're not talking about a few months in jail anymore. The penalty is up to 7 years. Yeah, the strategy of trying to disappear has officially and catastrophically failed.
So let's move on to Act 2 and see how this thing builds. Since running and hiding is clearly a dead end, our character has to pivot. If they can't avoid the law, maybe they can mislead it. They're no longer a ghost. Now they're an architect, carefully building a web of lies. And you can see the pattern here, right? Just like in Act 1, there's a clear progression. It starts passively. You're supposed to produce a document, and you just don't. That's omitting. Then it gets more active. You give some information, but you strategically leave out the key parts you're legally supposed to include. And finally, you cross that line from just hiding the truth to actively creating a new one, furnishing information you know is totally false. The law itself gives us this perfect and frankly chilling example. A landowner knows a murder happened on his property. When the magistrate asks what happened, he doesn't just stay quiet, he makes up a cover story. It was a snake bite. See, this isn't just a little fib to avoid some paperwork, it's a deliberate act designed to send a murder investigation down a completely wrong path. It shows you exactly the kind of high-stakes deception this law is targeting.
That the lies can get even darker. I mean, it's one thing to lie to save your own skin, it's another thing entirely to lie to ruin someone else's life. Section 217 deals with this malicious turn, giving false information with the specific goal of tricking a public servant into using their official power to hurt or harass somebody else. At this point, lies aren't just a shield anymore, they're being used as a weapon.
Okay, the web of lies has unraveled. Our character is now in a formal proceeding, literally face-to-face with the authority they've been trying so hard to dodge and deceive. The game has totally changed. This is Act 3, Defiance Under Oath. This is where contempt becomes direct, personal, and incredibly serious.
The defiance starts at the most basic level imaginable, refusing the oath itself. A public servant, who is legally allowed to do this, asks you to swear to tell the truth, and you just say no. In that one moment, you're rejecting the very foundation of testimony, the core principle that makes the whole thing work.
All right, so let's say our character actually takes the oath. They swear to tell the truth. But when the first question is asked, crickets. Just silence. Being legally bound to state the truth and then flat out refusing to answer is the next step up. It's a direct slap in the face to the oath they just took.
And the final piece of this defiant little trilogy is refusing to sign your own statement. You've given the testimony, it's all been written down, and now you refuse to confirm that those are your words. It's the last possible move to try and undermine the legitimacy of your own testimony.
And this brings us to the ultimate price for defying an oath:
If you don't just refuse to cooperate, but you actively lie after being sworn in, making a statement you know for a fact is false, you've committed a very grave offense. This is basically the heart of perjury. The bottom line is, once you take that oath, the consequences for being dishonest just skyrocket. We're talking a maximum penalty of 3 years in prison.
So words have failed. Lies have failed. Defiance has failed. Our character now shifts from verbal resistance to physical interference. Let's get into Act 4, where they start to actively and physically get in the way of justice. This table lays out a common scenario perfectly. Just imagine a public servant shows up with a lawful order to take possession of some property. Resisting that action, that carries a 6-month penalty. Then, if they try to auction that property, getting in the way of the sale is a whole separate offense. Even making a fraudulent bid you have no intention of paying is a specific crime. It's a whole family of laws designed to make sure court orders can actually be enforced in the real world.
And obstruction is about way more than just property. It can be as simple as deliberately getting in the way of an officer who's just trying to do their job. It can also be about not doing something, like refusing to help an officer when you're legally required to. And then there's the most direct form of all, knowingly disobeying a lawful order, like blowing past a public safety directive.
We've reached the final, most dangerous act on this very dark path. All other forms of resistance have been used up. Now, only the most desperate tactic is left. This is Act 5, where contempt escalates to direct threats of harm.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the law gives two-sided protection. Threatening a public servant to scare them out of doing their duty is a serious crime, and it carries a 2-year sentence. But the law also protects every citizen's right to ask for help. Threatening someone to scare them away from filing a police report is also a crime. The system protects both its officers and everyone's access to them.
And this brings us to the ladder's final and frankly tragic rung. This is a very specific and serious offense, attempting suicide, not out of despair, but as a calculated act to force someone's hand. The intent has to be to compel a public servant to do something or stop them from doing something that they are lawfully required to do. It is the ultimate and most extreme form of contempt.
So, from simply trying to disappear to making direct threats, we followed the whole escalating story of contempt of authority. These laws are really the bedrock that allows a system of justice to function at all. But it kind of leaves us with a bigger question, doesn't it? Does the authority of the law, at the end of the day, rest on the penalties for breaking it, or on a shared belief that the system itself is worthy of our respect? That's definitely something to think about.